Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Reiki Women podcasts. My name is Michaela Daystar of Heartscapes Reiki, and with me today, as always, is Bronwyn Logan of Reiki with Bronwyn, and Carrie Varela of the Reiki Healing Society, who is back from her pilgrimage to Japan. This is the day we have been waiting for. We get to hear from Carrie about all that she experienced and saw and integrated and is probably still integrating from this amazing trip. And she's going to share it all with you along with us. So, Carrie, you have put an amazing, beautiful picture on the screen to start us off, and we would love to hear about your trip.
Well, thanks, guys. I was thinking about you all the time while I was gone, and it was such a special experience to go to Japan and have this opportunity to pilgrim to the sacred sites of Reiki. And so I thought I'd start off with this photo because, well, first of all, most of the temples, all of the temples, I would say, in Japan, there's a general policy, no photographs of the icons, the deities. However, this photo was taken in the Tokyo National Museum, and you'll see the central figure is Kanan. And so she is just such a big part of the experience that I had. So much of what I learned about was really centered around her, among many other players in the Japanese pantheon of Buddhist deities. And so Kanan here, she's you can see she has many arms, and so she's often depicted as the thousand-arm Buddha. And the idea there is that with those many hands, it's about helping as many people as you can. And so she is also centered in the main temple of Mount Karama, and we'll go more in depth about Mount Karama later. But also around Kanan here, you can see the four wisdom deities, which are oriented around the four directions. And then there's another main deity that got to see a lot of is Fudomayo. So he is the main wisdom deity. So it's interesting that they portray the four direction deities, but Fudomayo is considered to be like the king of the other four. And so he's also, you'll see, well, just a lot of references to him if you ever go to Japan. But I also know that Bronwyn and Michaela also have a lot of knowledge about Kanan, so feel free to chime in about anything that you know or want to share about Kanan. But that's a good place to start. I also want to do some acknowledgments. So my tour guide was Bruce Taylor of Roots of Reiki, and he did a phenomenal tour, and I really recommend doing a tour with him, or just doing a tour with somebody who's knowledgeable of the area, especially if you go to Japan, it's your first time there. There is quite a difference between culture and language, and just getting around and to really be able to drop in and really immerse yourself in the culture and the greater depth of knowledge about the area. I would highly recommend having a tour guide. Also want to acknowledge Yakuten Inamoto, who was with us on a tour and just offered so much depth of knowledge from his perspective as a Japanese Reiki practitioner. And then also my husband, who went on the journey with me. And so it was really special to go on that journey together. So here's a few pictures from the airport. Welcome to Japan. Japan's such a unique place. It's like there's this contrast between this rich, deep spirituality, this connection to nature, these incredible temples, and then also like emojis and modern culture and subways and cell phones and massive amounts of technology. So you see some of that juxtaposed. And we had a great time. This is the Tokyo National Museum, and I just wanted to share a few gems from the Tokyo National Museum because, well, it was the first day I was there, and well, there was just so much to experience while I was there. But it set a really nice frame for all the things I got to see and witness while I was there. So One of the things that I saw a lot of representation of is the Amida symbol, or symbol again representing Amida, or often I think they're interchanged with Kanan. Is that right, Bronwyn? Like Kanan and Amida interchange with one another?
I'm not
You're
sure about
muted.
that, Carrie. Keep going.
Okay. Well, anyways, here's this Amida symbol, and we know that this symbol is the foundation of the second Reiki symbol, Seiheki. And so it's really everywhere within temples and Buddhist temples in Japan, but here it is at the Tokyo National Museum. There's also within this display, there was a talk about, or this stone tablet depicting Dainichi, and Dainichi, we can associate that with the fourth Reiki symbol, Daikomyo. And you'll see it also talking about the diamond realm, which I'm assuming they're also meaning a connection to Pure Land Buddhism, which is also something that somewhat frames the pilgrim, the all the things I got to see, and anything that you would get to see if you went and traveled to Japan as well. So then again, there's that picture of Kanan. Some other images from the Tokyo National Museum, including the Sleeping Buddha. So if you're familiar with Buddhism, there's 4 main sites that are really revered within Buddhism. It's where he was born, where he achieved enlightenment, where he started his school, and where he died. And so anytime you see a sleeping Buddha here, you're seeing a representation of his death. And then I thought this was really interesting. There's this chakra wheel. And I know in our podcast, we talked a lot of times about, the interplay between, the foundations, the traditional viewpoints of Reiki, and then also how it's kind of intermixed with New Age metaphysical concepts. But the chakras, of course, are ancient, and they are, quintessentially yogic, but nowadays within Reiki, you see chakras and Reiki kind of almost seem like that they're completely concurrent with each other. They're not. The Japanese worldview around the subtle body is the 3 diamonds, hara, head, and heart. And yet, there's still this presence of chakras in Japan. So this is a Dharma wheel. It's excavated from the Edo Castle, and this Dharma wheel was used in esoteric Buddhism to pacify the land. So that pole was inserted through the hole of the center, and then I'm assuming that they spin that wheel to help, clear the energy of the land, pacify the land. So, even though that, Reiki and chakras can go together like peanut butter and jelly, you can see how like the chakras might have their own unique cultural expressions in Japan as opposed to in India, or as opposed to how we represent them in the West.
Just a question, but how does that relate to chakras?
These chakra wheels?
Yeah. I mean, I don't see
I'm assuming that this chakra wheels is a representation of knowledge of the chakra system as a whole that are used then in its own cultural way in Japan. So the idea of them spinning, for example, of that movement of energy. So it just, to me, it just symbolized, I'm not completely sure about that, but it symbolized that there is this like kind of cultural ubiquitousness or blending together of these cultural ideas, that it's not like chakras, no, those are an Indian thing. No, that they actually did come all the way to Japan as well, but may have been used in different ways than we understand them from
because what I was thinking about with that, Carrie, is that maybe it's using the terminology of chakra. I just don't see the chakras in the actual, I don't see that related so much to it, maybe. But maybe, what does chakra mean? I think it means wheel, doesn't it? Or something like that? Or energy wheel or something. So maybe it's more just a language thing. I just don't see like 7 chakras or whatever. Don't know. I was just thinking.
Yeah, well, I think is there 7 of them there, or is there 8?
There's
Looks like there's 8.
one, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, yeah. Well, see, and that's the thing. That's the juicy part about going on a tour, because if you're traveling alone through these areas, it's like you come up against all of these questions, and there's so much to know, so much to learn, and so through the stance of time and through those cultural lenses, sometimes we really can't see exactly or have all of our questions answered. But yes, chakra means wheel, so it could be utilizing that word in a different way.
Yeah.
And then also, a Shigundo practice. I'll talk a little bit about Shigundo, but one of the Shigundo practices is to build the 5 layers of the elements in our subtle body using some of the imagery that is represented in this pagoda. And although this is in the Tokyo National Museum, you'll see them, everywhere through Japan, little pagodas representing the 5 elements. And so I thought that was really cool. And here's just a picture of me. I'm in total heaven because I am an anthropologist at heart, and the culture, the religion, artifacts of Japan were just such a marvel for me. And one part of our mental health is just to feel intellectually stimulated. And so here I was, like, completely engrossed, intellectually stimulated, on cloud 9. So this is a little segment that came from some of the descriptions at the Tokyo National Museum, but I thought they were really relevant to my journey through Japan, which was about mountain worship and the belief in the decline of Buddhism. So from the Nara period to the Henan period, priests who worshiped the mountains began to appear in Japan. They believed that Shinto and Buddhism were essentially the same faith, and that Shinto gods are in fact Buddhist deities. They climbed to mountains in search of sacred sites where they could worship mountain gods. And this form of mountain worship eventually developed into Shigundo, a folk religion unique to Japan. And we do know definitely that Yusui was a lay Shigundo practitioner. And many of the practices that he did, especially at Mount Kurama, were related to Shigundo practices and linked back. And so I'll mention that. We'll kind of go back to this point a few times. And then this is a little fast forward through my tour. So a couple days later, I got to see a Shigundo temple, and I'm kind of intentionally keeping the names discreet, just because I know Bruce put so much work and time and energy into the tour, and I hate to just like kind of give all of the goodies out of the experience to you all without having that experience. But just to know that this is a Shigundo temple. It's one of the main Shigundo temples in Kyoto and in Japan. And some of the practices that influenced Reiki were fasting, the waterfall meditation, the whole idea of mountain asceticism, or being out of like our normal day-to-day routines and going to the mountain for specific spiritual practices. What was Yusui's motive for heading to the mountain? We don't know completely, but probably given some of these different influences that were on him, some of the motivations for going there was to dissolve the senses, to release our attachment to the senses. And you'll see representations of that quite a bit in Kurama. And then also just, again, releasing attachments through different aesthetic practices. And then ultimately, one of the motives for doing those kinds of practices is this realization of the self. And so as you recall in my last slide, this Henan period, 794 to 1192, in the late Henan period was when this specific temple was built. And like most of the temples in the area, they've been burned down many times due to fires. And so this particular one has it came out of the phoenix, out of a fire maybe a couple hundred years ago. It was rebuilt. And And then this is also relevant, and I'll show it more towards the end of the slideshow, but in the mid-Henan period, there's this belief in the decline of Buddhism, and the age of decline was thought to begin in 1052, and leading people to associate recurring natural disasters and disturbances in society with this new age. So in response, aristocrats and others living in the capital began to create suture mounds throughout Japan. Aristocrats also believed in a prophecy that the Buddhist deity Maitreya would reappear. And I did the math many times, 5.6 trillion years from now in the future. That seems like a long time. Maybe it was 5.76 billion years from now, but nevertheless, this like idea of a really long timeline, that Maitreya would reappear, save all living beings, and transcribing sutra scrolls and preserving them in sutra mounds was likely a way of praying for peace in the world, and in this world and the next during troubling times. And so you see evidence of that bearing sutra mounds on Mount Kuruma, but I'll share more about that later. And then just more beautiful things from the Tokyo National Museum. So you see this pagoda, it has 5 levels, and those also are more than likely symbolic of the 5 elements. There's this beautiful tree that sits at the center of all of these different complexes around the Tokyo National Museum, and I was just so struck by how big and gorgeous it is. And then also we understand that Yusui probably came from a samurai clan, and so he has some samurai roots, and that might be one of the reasons also that he had like the permission within society, within his family, to be the spiritual person that he was, to engage in those spiritual practices. So next up, I'm off to Kyoto, and unfortunately I was trying to set this slideshow up so that I could show you some videos, but I was going to show you this video of the bullet train taking me to Kyoto, but unfortunately my videos are not coming through. But nevertheless, this is the bullet train. It's incredibly futuristic, moves over like 200 miles an hour. It's pretty incredible technology. Getting people around in Japan is something to witness for sure. But the thing that you all want to see, I'm sure, is Karama. Reiki's Mecca, its birthplace, it's the source of all the lineages of Reiki. And here is the main temple on Mount Karama. And I got to experience 3 days on this mountain. It was definitely not enough, but you know, I went to a lot of temples, and I've been to a lot of temples through various travels, and I have to say I was just totally blown away by the beauty inside of this temple. Of course, I couldn't take any pictures, but truly it's something to see if you love Reiki. If you're a Reiki practitioner, you just got to go someday. And going to Mount Karama is really not complete unless you see, this is like the statue that's right outside of the train station on Karama. These are my fellow Reiki pilgrims who are joining me. And this is an image of Tengu. And it always just cracks me up. This guy has a huge nose. You can't really see through the reflection or the angle of this photo. But feel free, Bronwyn and Michaela, to chime in about Tengu. But Tengu are like mountain spirits. They're a little bit mischievous and malevolent. They kind of mess with you. And yet their intention is good. And all of the Tengu, they are ultimately trying to test you, to show your fears, to illuminate your own dramas, your traumas, your challenges, in order to get like all the way through to the other side. And so they're celebrated on Mount Kuruma, I think on other places as well, but certainly a lot on Mount Kuruma. And they have some deep symbolism in terms of its relationship, of course, to Shigundo too. anything you guys want to chime in about the Tengu?
The just feeling the similarity with the description you just gave, and with Fudomyo and his the paradox between his fearsome appearance and his compassionate intentions, in terms of helping us to do many of the same things that you describe, cutting away those traumas and distractions and the things that are in the way from us being in full connection with life. So I'm appreciating that connection.
Mhm. Awesome. Yes, thanks for chiming in. So here's the main entrance coming into Mount Karama. It's beautifully taken care of mountain. And as you come into the mountain and up to the temple, you see this fountain to Kanaan, and just some other imagery, like these very iconic light posts that are painted orange, and just different elements painted orange. We were all laughing because this was our first day on Mount Karama. We took so many pictures of these light poles because we were so excited, and we're just like, just had gotten it in, and we were just like, couldn't take enough pictures of these these light poles. And so like most of us just like filtered all of our photos of like a billion of these images, but they're everywhere on Mount Karama. And this is a beautiful piece that's the whole route up to Karama. There's a bunch of little excursions you can take, and this statue represents love, light, and strength, and it's a symbol of the teachings of Mount Karama. It is the most futuristic statue that's on the mountain. Most of the other statues really kind of fall in line of looking similar, but this one looks quite unique and different and futuristic. But those rings representing love, light, and strength. They could also represent, I'm sure, earth, heart, and mind. They could also represent power, love, and light as well. All of those kind of different layers of meaning are attached to the three diamonds, essentially symbolic of the three diamonds from Karama. There's also this gorgeous dragon fountain, and water features are everywhere, and water representing, of course, a harmony with the five elements, but also symbolic perhaps of movement of energy, a flowing of energy. One of the things you can do in this particular fountain is wash your hands or rinse your hands, and that's a purification ritual. There's this Yaki shrine, which you can't really see the magnificence of it because this was a video here, but this cedar tree is over 800 years old, and it's 53 meters tall. And so I had this video of like, you could see it going up into the sky, and then there's a little tie around the tree, which is significant. It's considered a kami or god. And so kami, or significant parts of nature, are if they're revered by the people in the area, then they will tie something around the tree or around that particular object to indicate its significance. So it's believed if you pray to the tree with your whole heart, your wish will come true. And there's also some symbology around lion dogs and the belief and a symbolism of healthy babies. So perhaps if you lived in the area, you could go and pray at that shrine for the health of your children. And then this is the main hall of Mount Karama. Again, just absolutely stunning, so gorgeous, and so much to say and see about this inner symbolism inside of the temple, but I'll get to that in a little bit. A little bit about the history of the temple, which I think is really interesting. So, and again, Bronwyn, Michaela, feel free to chime in. But according to the records dating back to 770, there was a Chinese monk named Gancho, and he had a dream where he was instructed to go to the north, where a large amount of spiritual power was concentrated, and Tengu and mountain spirits were said to dwell. On his way, he became hopelessly lost until he met with a god in his dream, and it instructed him to look to the east, or to look to the sky in the east the next morning to behold a miracle. And when he did, the monk was shocked to see a white horse carrying an empty saddle. And he followed that horse until he arrived on the mountain that would later be called Mount Kuruma, and it's spelled with the kanji characters for horse and a saddle. So he followed the white horse to Kurama. And then after that, he set up camp, but he's set upon by a female oni intent on devouring him. The monk tussled with the demon and fled from her, seeking refuge in a hollow tree where he began to pray for salvation. In answer, the guardian of the north, Bishamontaine, exterminated that demon. And in thanks to Bishamontaine, Gasho established a small hermitage on the site in order to strive for enlightenment and worship this heavenly king. So according to other legends, that's symbolic within the temple. On the first day, the first month and year of the tiger in the Chinese calendar, Bishamontaine descended down from the sun to Mount Kurama, seeking residence in a temple along with 2 tigers for protection. So I'll show in a future picture, but there's 2 tigers framing the temple. Those are very unique to Kurama, as most temples in Japan have lions protecting or guarding a temple. And so here you'll see this is another image of the temple, and then that's one of the tigers framing the side of the temple. And unfortunately, I didn't get a very good view of it, but you'll see it in future photos. There's this big like sacred geometry at the base of the temple. So this is the main temple is behind me here. And there's this triangle, and that represents the triangle representing the 3 diamonds. It could also represent earth, love, and light. And then around the diamond is a 6-pointed star. 5-pointed star. And that represents the dissolution of the 5 senses. So again, one of the practices, aesthetic practices that Yusui was more than likely doing on Mount Kurama was absolving himself, releasing his attachment to the 5 senses. And so that's also symbolic here at the base of the main temple. And you see that a few times. And these are the mountains that kind of frame Mount Kurama. Here's a little map with, the names of all of the mountains around, but the mountains feel so alive and beautiful. And when the wind is moving through the trees, it looks like the trees are literally breathing or pulsing on the mountain. The way in which, you see these different layers and colors of trees is more than likely indicative that somebody was very carefully tending gardens on these mountains and cultivating trees in different groves. And then flowers were blooming on Mount Kurama. There's these gorgeous orchids, and wisteria were in bloom. It was just really beautiful and vibrant spring on the mountain. So from the main temple, you go further up mountain and you start to see these cedar trees, and the cedar trees are everywhere, and their roots are everywhere as well, because cedar trees, the roots are like, they kind of spread out right on the surface. They spread out far and wide, but fairly shallowly. But what is unique about the top of the mountain, first of all, of course, it's this place where Yusui, we don't know the exact location, of course, of where he had his Reiki transmission or experience of great Reiki, but he tripped on the roots of these trees. And the reason why these roots are so pronounced is that this is the top of the mountain, and the mountain is so hard. So the trees have no choice but to have incredibly shallow roots. And it also seems symbolic too of the earth element, which is something that you see more and more symbolized as you come to this part of the mountain. But those, my friends, are the roots of Reiki. Quite beautiful. And then as you go over the saddle of the mountain, there's this temple to Fudomayo. Temple, everybody who's been there said that it's never been opened, but I'm sure there is a beautiful depiction of Fudo inside of those doors. This is right in front of Fudomayo's temple, and you can see these three symbols here, and more than likely that's representing the three diamonds. And if you look at them more closely, each one is also a depiction of the three diamonds. So the earth element, the air element, mind, or earth, heart, mind, and the swirling action is depicted as, or that's symbolizing the movement or flow of energy. The outer rim of the circle is, no, this isn't unique to this particular temple. There was many of the temples I saw in Japan have this symbol. But what is unique to Mount Kuroma is this idea that Sonten is the supreme deity that kind of stands in the background of those three ideas. So when there is this perfect balance or harmony between earth, love, and light, power, love, and light, and that energy is circulating, that movement of energy is held in this bigger deity of Sonten. The earth element is represented by Mauden, and you'll see him, a temple to him shortly, and then also I've mentioned Kanan, and then Bishop Montaigne. So Mauden is the deity. He's very unique. He's associated with only with Mount Kurama. And I'll show more about him later. But so like that depth of meaning around the three diamonds and the different ways it's represented, the different layers of meaning that those three symbols can mean, and then are represented in different ways, is really obviously prevalent. And then if you see this bigger picture, that's representative of, you know, the three diamonds in harmony and spinning and movement held in Sonten, and then these radiating circles around it, representing radiant energy. And I also want to acknowledge my husband. He took a lot of these photos. He's a really beautiful photographer. But this is the temple to Mausen, and I mentioned him a couple times. So inside of the temple, the main hall in Mount Kurama, there is a representation of him. But he is a very unique Japanese Buddhist deity, so unique to Japan and solely unique to Mount Kurama. And he has an interesting story. I'm sure Bronwyn, Michaela, you probably know a little bit about him, but his story is pretty out there. They say he came from Venus, and he came and descended to the earth 6.5 billion years ago, and that he was this powerful deity, Buddhist deity, that was holding the energy of humanity and brought the energy of humanity to the earth. And so he came so powerfully to the mountain that as he came, his foot smashed down on this rock and crumbled it everywhere. And so this temple is representing, well, it's supposed to be that exact spot where he came to the earth, and the crumbled rocks all around are there. And so pretty. I want to talk about grounding. This is a very grounded place for sure. And I don't have really any good pictures of Mausen, unfortunately, because again, all of those icons are kind of shielded from photographs, and you can't find any information about him online. But I wish the video came through on this, but this was a little fountain right outside of his temple. And everybody on the tour just got so mesmerized by this fountain because there is absolutely no ripple as the water comes out of this fountain and into the containment area. So then, and it didn't matter like if there was wind, swaying the water to and fro, it didn't matter. There was just absolutely no ripple of the water as it came down into the fountain. And so, you know, when you think about Reiki, thinking about Ansan Ritsume and just the idea of having a calm, peaceful mind, and that is one of the things that we step into, we get to experience more of as we release our attachments, as we let go of attachment to our senses and attachment to desires. Our mind becomes more still like and reflected to us, back to us in nature by this fountain. So this other photo is really interesting, and it reflects the cosmology of Mount Kuruma. So I've talked about Mauden, and so he represents Venus. He's thought to have come to the Earth from Venus again 6.5 billion years ago. Came, you know, smashed the rock and was anchored here on this planet in Mount Kuruma. And then Canaan is associated with the moon, and then Bishop Montaigne, the other deity here, is representative of the sun. So that cosmology, this is in the cable car going up the mountain, you can see this whole pictograph. And then Santen is said to be like when these three deities are in balance or in place, they point us in the direction of Santen, a supreme deity, perhaps above those three. One of the really magical things I got to experience while I was there, well, there's so many magical things, but well, one of the things that I'd want to mention is that I got to run into a few people through that were just kind of in Japan because of the time I was there, the proximity, close to 100 years of, or the anniversary of Reiki after 100 years. It's actually 101 years. And so Justin Stein was there, along with this man named Olaf Braun, who's writing a really amazing book about the history of Reiki. And so he's was in the area. And so we got to meet up with a lot of people here at this fire ceremony that happened on the full moon night. So every year in May, there's a fire ceremony on the full moon. And you know, Reiki has, Mount Kuruma has its significance, of course, to us as Reiki practitioners, but there's also an incredible significance of this land and this mountain to the Japanese people, which is unique and different than its meaning to us as Reiki practitioners. But I got to experience this fire ceremony. It was all in Japanese, but everybody was decked out to the nines. So there was a main priest, there was many monks and nuns in attendance, and they guided us through this incredible ceremony. Most of it was in Japanese, some of it was in English, although it was very hard to understand. But from what I gather, it's about burning through karma. It was about releasing ourselves from these attachments so that we can realize the light inside of us. So these are some pictures we took after the ceremony. No pictures were allowed during it. And everyone was given one of these votives, red votives. And at the end of the ceremony, along these geometric patterns in front of the temple, people place their votives. And so you can see some of the symbology. So the 5-pointed star, the 3 diamonds, and there's a little peek at the full moon that was coming through the clouds and through the trees to grace us. And more views of the lanterns coming down from Mount Kuruma, more views of the temple all lit up at night. It was spectacular. And then I thought I'd share a little bit about one final evening I got to have on Mount Kuruma. Was really special. So we traveled to the north side of the mountain, to this place called Deep Kurama. And I mentioned in my little spiel from the Tokyo National Museum that there was this evidence of these monks putting sutra mounds or creating sutra mounds, bearing sutras for the Buddhist matriarch or when she reemerges. So this is one sutra mound that is in Deep Kurama, and it's the second oldest one in the area. And Deep Kurama is also really symbolic of Bishamontaine. It's in the north, and or this area is northern to Kyoto, and he is the guardian of the north. And so one of the things that we got to do was go to this temple that had been recently taken under its wing by a sponsor, and that family was there with us, and they were drawn to the area because of the energy that it held, the significance of these sutra mounds, and they were taking care of this temple. They had just taken it under their wing and were reopening it to the public. And so we got to have an evening in the temple with an incredible artist, Hiroki Okano, who is a very accomplished Japanese musician, and he has incredible music. Really goes well. If you're ever giving Reiki and you need some more music, definitely check out his music. So he gave us, there was a monk there, they did a ceremony, we had this music, and they invited us to share Reiki and fill the space with Reiki. And at one point, Yakutin was with us, and he encouraged us to send peace to the world. And we were just all really swept away in this beautiful, amazing energy, and kind of held in this lap of Bishamontaine. And after the concert, we had a dinner at one of the houses of somebody who lived nearby, and Hiroki Okano was there at dinner, and I had a chance to talk a little bit more about him or learn from him and his perspective on Reiki as a Japanese person. And this also mirrored what Yakutin Inamoto said. It's that there's so many different lineages of Reiki, and yet half of them, more than half of them, have their origin from a different place other than Mount Kuruma. And from their point of view, that's not Reiki. So if you're starting to put, your Reiki coming from Egypt or from Jesus or from different areas, that feels like a very clear line for them as something that is not Reiki. And equally, when I was talking to Hiroki, he also had a really interesting perspective that, there's these Buddhist and Shinto elements of Reiki, and they're kind of all in the backdrop of Reiki, but what really sets the tone for Reiki is Shigundo, is these esoteric mountain practices that Yusui did, and definitely brought some of those threads and elements to the system of Reiki. And again, we just want to thank Bruce, Yakutin Sensei, and everybody else who supported me to go on this journey. And when you go to Japan, you will undoubtedly be supported by others who get you there. So you can see next to this sign next to me and Yakutin, there's the symbol of Dai, or great. And right where I am, I'm on the top of the mountain, and there's called Yusugi Gangen, where the roots of the tree is, but there used to be this big giant cedar tree there that was said to be the living manifestation of Mausen, and it recently got blown over by a typhoon, but there's a lot of, it's a really beautiful part of the mountain as well. But I'm sure this sign means the great cedar tree, but you'll see that reflection in the Daikomyo symbol if you're familiar with it. Some other fun things. There was a lot of other fun things. I also got to see the memorial stone in Japan, and that was really fantastic. I just ran out of time putting some pictures together for that, but maybe on a future one I'll show you some pictures from there. But like everything with Japan, it's just this mixture of very ancient to very new, and then to very cute and eclectic, like cats, painted on a wall, and adorable pigeons, and here's me in front of a giant whale. So thank you all so much for listening about my travels through Japan, and I hope that sparks something really beautiful for you and helps you feel a little bit more connected to the roots of Reiki.
Thank you so much, Carrie.
Yeah, of course. If you have any questions, my co-hosts, or people who have questions from, you can obviously leave them in the comments on this video, and I'd be happy to go back and answer them for you.
Yeah. I love that you ended on a photo of you and the whale, because your signature retreat that you host is called Whale Song, and that tickles me to see on the other, in a totally different place that you still gravitate towards whales.
Oh yeah, well, they found me and I was like, that was my exact, response. So.
Absolutely. Good. Well, folks, if you have questions for Carrie about her trip, if you've been to any of these sites, had your own experiences in these areas, we would love to hear about them. This was obviously a very image-focused podcast recording. So those of you watching on YouTube had the advantage of all of the images. Those of you listening on audio only, you might want to jump on over to YouTube and check out the video version of this particular one, so you can see all the beautiful richness that we got to see. But there was quite a bit in what you shared verbally as well. So I know that wherever you're listening, that you got a lot out of this broadcast. And we will be back next week to explore more fun topics. And first Sunday of next month, Carrie will be leading us in our practice circle and will undoubtedly infuse some of what she brought back from Japan into that time. So thank you so much for being with us. Bronwyn, any last words from you?
Oh, it was lovely to see. So beautiful. It's been over. I was just thinking as I was sitting there, it's over 20 years since I've been there, which is why I was like, oh, yeah, do I remember that? I've got a memory like a sieve, right? So, it was beautiful to see and to relive, all those beautiful places and yeah, I was thinking, you said the roots of Reiki. I mean, I have written so many articles that say the roots of Reiki, with that image of the roots of the cedar trees. You just can't help yourself because it's so beautiful. Yeah, just a spectacular place, and just that feeling of just being a part of the history is really enriching, isn't it? It's just a lovely thing to do. So thank you for that, Carrie.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks so much for letting me share about my journey. It's so wonderful to share, and it's just it's really something you have to see for yourself if you love Reiki and if you have the opportunity. And I know it's hard to get over there, it's hard to travel, but it is such an enriching experience, and to see it all. Even though I put a lot of it into pictures, it's something to see for yourself. So I'm always happy to support people. If you need a little help getting to Japan or need help getting around there, I'd be happy to share what I know or what I've learned from my one trip. It's really not that much, but
Wonderful.
It's nice to be able to help people to get in contact with Yakutin and things like that as well. I mean, he's just such a gorgeous being, and so supportive of all of us crazy Westerners who end up on his doorstep. So, that's a beautiful thing to be able to do for people too.
Yeah, I mean, I learned so much from Yakutin. He gave us several lectures. We did a Reiki share at his location, and he does do a weekly Reiki share. So if you're ever in Kyoto, it might be a way to connect and experience that. But he is such an incredible voice for Japanese Reiki practitioners, and building and establishing more Reiki practitioners in Japan is definitely a big part of his mission in life. but he had so much gems, so much wisdom to share with me, and felt really enriched by his presence. And the tour was really powerful. So
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Carrie, for putting all of that together for us. I'm sure it will continue to enrich our conversations for many months to come. And we will be back with all of you next week with another engaging conversation. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you liked this broadcast, please do share it around. It's a great help to us in spreading the word of the podcast. And until we see you again, we love you. Goodbye.